What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today, when I talked about SoFi. Today was a rather exciting day for SoFi, a lot of volatility. I want to talk on what caused that volatility, what the current data points are saying, and everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And with that said, let's get right to it. So it did close 0.07% in the green after hours. This going down slightly, but a lot of volatility. So $7.31 was the low, $7.73 was the high. A lot of volume, so 43.18 million shares were traded. 42.5 is the average. Today there was no news, no SEC filings, rather it was GDP numbers that was giving the market a nice push today. So as you can kind of see on the quarter by quarter basis, it came in at 5.2 versus the forecast was 4.9. So a lot of the data points behind the scenes have been really rather good, showing that the economy is strong, and plus a lot of stocks, mostly with exception of SoFi, are at their 52-week and all-time high. So in reality, I do see that a lot of bigger and better things are coming down the pipeline. Plus, going into next week, you are going to have this as a fairly good catalyst, in my opinion, the Q&A. And so based on the Q&A, either Anthony or Chris are going to be answering these questions, some of which, so probably around 3 to 5 questions I anticipate. But it says, when is a company going to be profitable? They have said this time and time again, but still, it is good to kind of hear it once again, just to have confirmation of that. And based on analysts, they are estimating that this is the quarter that they are going to start to be profitable. So analysts are kind of in conjunction with what they've been saying. So still, that's the number one voted question with 990 votes, which is represented by 5.3 million shares, SoFi shares. So pretty good stuff. Second question is, SoFi will be profitable in the next few years. Do you plan to deliver dividends to shareholders in the future? So that's a good question. I don't feel like they're in the position to do that, but you never know. I think it's going to be a very neutral answer, so I don't think they want to write it off, but they won't really allude to it, so it'll be rather neutral. This one right here is more so about Technisys, how they previously guided between 85 to 100 million in savings between 2023 and 2025, so they're just asking for a little bit more of an update. And so yeah, I think overall pretty good questions, no matter what. And even though a lot of the questions have been answered previously within the last 6 months, still investors want updates. So when it comes down to some of the data points, I'll give you an overview starting off with options. $7.12 million in calls being purchased versus 1.45 million in puts. So people are very, very optimistic about SoFi based on this. And like I said in my last video, I think it was 2 days ago or whenever, like the reason why SoFi is rallying as much as it has been is purely just based on the technicals. And I think in reality, this whole Q&A does have a little bit more of a catalyst aspect to that as well. But SoFi's movement and price action has purely just been its technicals. Even today, a lot of just bouncing off of support and resistance points. So I'm going to go over all that. But like I said, options activity, very optimistic. And looking at the calls, so this is all the volume from today, shows all the strike prices, expiry dates. Based on this information, it is anticipated to close above 750 by the end of this week. So kind of good stuff. Looking at the puts though, it is anticipated for it to close below around $7. So still a lot more optimistic than what it once was, because I think the start or the tail end of last week, people were anticipating for it to close below $6. So I think a lot of good things, and a lot of people are starting to realize that SoFi might be the next big thing in the market. Of course, a lot of people have really moved towards Palantir. I think that's been the hot stock over the last little bit, but I do feel that SoFi might actually have its time to shine maybe in the next couple of quarters. My own opinion, of course, not financial advisor. You do see a lot of big money getting into SoFi, and clearly based on the volume that matches that. And I'm going to touch on technicals in a second, but when it comes down to shorts, I'll give you an overview of what they are doing and what they did, because I do oddly see some people on Twitter saying that SoFi has been suppressed today because of shorts, and that's not necessarily the case. But shorts did ultimately return 155,000 shares, 15.12% or 15.14% of the free float is being shorted, which is rather high. 135.55 million shares overall are being shorted, and through Interactive Brokers, short availability does indicate that there is more than 10 million shares available to be shorted. Cost of our average is 0.09%. 10%. So in reality, like I've said time and time again, SoFi is not a squeeze play, just bringing this up as a benchmark. So the fact that they are returning shares on a green day, it does show that they feel is justified. So that's kind of a good thing. But when it comes to looking at this teal line, like shorts kind of increased a small amount very first thing, so around a couple 100,000. But as the day did pass, they were just returning shares, as you can kind of see. So there was no abnormal spikes. So as crazy as it is, they were probably the ones that were keeping it somewhat level and afloat, because by them returning, that does mean that they are buying, and by looking at the intraday, it was still going down, and that's with shorts buying to cover their position. So once again, that's kind of what happened behind the scenes. So there's a lot of people saying that shorts were the ones that was causing this. Wasn't necessarily the case. So once again, just make sure you guys do your own due diligence. There hasn't been any recent analyst ratings as of today or whatever else. I think the last one was about 5 days ago. Citibank, Arshwin, who does have a 59% success rating and $11 price target. And so yeah, pretty good stuff. I do feel that maybe after the Q&A, there will be another rush of new analyst ratings, either upping it or whatever else. Maybe Wedbush might reiterate their $3 price target again, since they love to manipulate SoFi. But who knows? We just have to sit tight and wait. But when it comes down to the technicals, let's talk about that. So like I said, with it closing at 735, it is trading between this S1 and the pivot. So $6.87 is going to be that next strong support, and 765 is going to be that next strong resistance. It actually, and very surprisingly, it did break this pivot point briefly. Didn't really have enough to justifiably stay there. Like I actually said a couple days ago, I do feel that they might actually touch this, but most likely it will bounce off of this, trend down and consolidate and try again. So oddly enough, it happened just as I said it. So like I mentioned over the last little bit, just the technicals have been the driving factor for SoFi. Of course, behind the scenes, it's just been a lot of good data points coming out from a larger scale. And with PCE coming out tomorrow, that might be the factor for it to once again test this pivot point and trend higher from there. But once again, as I always say, this is just a prediction, and no matter what, when you are investing in SoFi, you should be thinking bigger picture, because there's going to be a hell of a lot of volatility. Because looking at some of the fib levels, you can tell that even the gap between each other is very wide. So there's going to be a lot of volatility for SoFi, at least in the foreseeable future, until probably going back over here by the end of Q4 2024. That's probably when I do anticipate the volatility to kind of subside with SoFi. And by then, you never know. It could be easily back in the double digits, back to 15 or potentially even higher. So let me know your thoughts on SoFi. And looking at a couple data points right here, momentum shows number of retail investors have been getting back in ever since it looks like November the 22nd. And then looking at stochastic, you do see a nice deviation. So black line above the red, showing a nice bullish sentiment, and with it at 52, it is kind of neutral, so it's not really overbought or oversold. So there is still more room for it to potentially push higher, and like I mentioned, potentially even touching this pivot point once again and breaking above that with good data points coming out tomorrow. So let me know your thoughts on SoFi in the comments below. And I did forget to ask this, I guess my last video or whenever else, when it comes down to questions, even though these ones have the most votes, what other question would you like Anthony or Chris to answer? So what's your take on all that? Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And give yourself a shout out. Have you been buying or did you sell? What did you do with SoFi? And on a side note, if you've been doing options, what have you been picking as far as strike prices, expiry dates, and all the other fan jazz? I, oddly enough, was starting to look at SoFi call options today, because I do feel, like I mentioned, years from now, it could easily be back to the $10 range. And you do see a lot of $10 strike prices, even leading up to around January 2025, 2026. So a lot of optimism, and even scrolling down, it has as high as around $35 strike prices. No real activity for that though. So let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And one final thing, if you do like my channel and support the growth, take a look at my memberships, link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, I appreciate all of you watching.